So hey, if this is your first time watching a 10-10 movement video, then a giant hug and welcome to you all. If you're returning, again, thank you so much for taking an interest in moving your life and the lives of all the humans that we meet and touch around us towards living a 10 out of 10. Now, you know, I'm sort of well known for changing perspectives. That's what I like to do. I like to look at something that's challenging people en masse and see how we can look at that from a new angle that changes our perception to a new one that leaves us feeling more empowered, more inspired, more grounded, in a better place, basically. So at the moment, of course, we are faced with a world that's gone a little bit into an unhappy mode. In fact, the way I wanted to start this video, I wanted to do it, it's a little bit cheesy, but I'm doing it for a really, cool reason, I think. Maybe you won't agree, but that's all good. And that is that when the President of America, whoever that's been down the ages, addresses the American people, they always say, "My fellow Americans." And I always go, do you know what? That's sort of like, what does that mean when somebody that's not an American watches that? It sort of feels like you're discluded from that, yeah? So I wanted to welcome you today as my fellow humans. Because look, if we look at our beautiful planet Earth, I appreciate I've coloured it green here, but if we were in the space station right now, and we were looking down at our beautiful planet, there are things that we don't see. Which is incredible. In fact, I was asked once by an astronaut, as he showed us some pictures from the space shuttle, what don't you see as you look down on planet Earth? And actually, none of us there actually got the answer, which was quite interesting, because it's unusual to ask someone what you don't see. But as we looked at these beautiful pictures he'd taken from the space shuttle, his point was that you don't see any borders. No borders, yeah? Now, obviously, the human race, over its journey to its current day, has chopped the planet up, metaphorically, and put these lines around where one side of the line you're in a country, and in the other side of the line you're in a different country. Now, of course, humans are on this journey of evolution to this very day, have, from a consciousness viewpoint, been, what you could call in the nursery of consciousness. So what do I mean by that? Well, consciousness itself it goes from a least expanded person or a least expanded place. One of my favourite examples is that of a light bulb with a dimmer switch. Yeah? So imagine you're in a room with no windows and somebody turns the light off. That would be, you'd be like completely in the dark, yeah? So imagine what that would be like, standing in a room with absolutely no light on. Many people will get frightened. You hear people who say, well, I'm frightened of the dark. Now, especially if you were put there and you don't really know where you are, you don't really know what's going on around you because you can't see anything. So that would be what we could class as the lowest level of consciousness. Now imagine somebody turns the dimmer switch on so bright, it's only a small room, but it's like a 150 watt light bulb, and it's so bright that you go from the darkness into this such bright light that it almost blinds you. That would be, let's take it as a metaphor, would be the most expanded a human could be. So we're either living completely in the dark or in a very bright, let's call it an enlightened space. Now, if we looked at where humanity, all of our human brothers and sisters, currently live en masse, then actually you'd have to ask yourself, do we live nearer the very bright light or do we live nearer the dark light? Now, of course, we're going to have different humans. Every one of us is an individual, so we're going to have different humans at different places, and it's not as simple as that because we're a moving feast. In other words, consciousness is it's part of a flow of life. So think about it. What is consciousness? Consciousness is one word I often swap it for is awareness. But awareness of what? Well, the key to understanding consciousness, if we really want to see it from a practical standpoint, is to go, yes, my personal awareness right now is my awareness of my thinking, the awareness of my thoughts. Am I aware of those? Now, if you're not aware of your thoughts, then you're much more down the darker end. Now, why would I say that? It's because when you're down the darker end and you're thinking, it's almost like you're not in control of those thoughts. Those thoughts are sort of in control of you, yeah? So, and what happens, what does the thought sort of convert to? What a thought converts to an emotion. So think about it. If you put your attention to something and you start to, think about it. Now this is all happening, of course, in milliseconds. But as we start to think about something and focus on something, you'll notice that there's an emotion inside your body. Now, for the less aware human, we will be down the darker end, not aware of that emotionality. So we're not aware of the thought, and we're not aware of the emotion. That's more the darker end. Now, what happens when you have that emotion? That emotion is created by chemicals and hormones in our body that we ourselves create. As a fundamental thing to remember. We create our own emotionality primarily because of where our thoughts go. So then what happens, once that we've got this emotionality in our body, this emotionality creates the behaviour that we then do. So that's sort of how we run. Now, if you're doing behaviours that aren't serving yourself as a human, or they're not serving the people around you, or they're not serving the greater good, then that would tend to imply we're more at the darker end. So let's just give you some numbers. Remember that we're in flow, and remember that also, if I asked you what are the key emotions that you commonly feel, that's a great question, because that's a step towards becoming more aware. So I did once buy a notepad, a little notepad from, I went into WH Smith's and bought this little pocket notebook with a little half a pencil like you get in Argos, yeah. And I decided that for 30 days, I love a bit of a 30-day test, a 10-day or 30-day test. So look, I thought I'm going to experiment on myself. I am going to check in. What is my thinking? What do I actually think? Now, some people have attempted to count how many thoughts you have in a day, and there are tens of thousands of them. Yeah, there are different numbers, but it doesn't really matter. All you need to know is there's tens of thousands, so you're never going to write all them down. So I wanted to write down what I call my predominant thoughts. So anyway, I started off to do this, and literally after about a week, I was beginning to really struggle, because as I looked at my predominant thoughts that I'd written down, what I noticed very quickly was that there was a pattern about these thoughts. In other words, the thoughts that I had were very, very repetitive on the one hand, and secondly, there were very few of them. I mean, I never kept the book. I sort of kicked myself sometimes because it was in my early days of personal, spiritual development. And literally, I could probably tell you I didn't have more than 10 or a dozen recurring thoughts, yeah? Now, as I looked at those thoughts, I asked myself the question, if it was like a positive, if it had a positive tag, or if it had a negative tag. And the scary thing was that not one of those thoughts had what I would call a positive tag. So I sort of discovered, and as I've worked on myself for 20 years, and I've coached thousands of people, of course I've noticed that pretty much all humans, especially the darker you are, the darker your thoughts are. Yeah. Now, if we agree that you're thinking, these dark thoughts are then connected to your emotions, what we need to find out and discover is what are the common emotions that are attached to these common, often negative thoughts. And then what behaviours are attached to those negative emotions. Yeah, make sense? So So the darker your thoughts, the more in the dark you are, and the less you can see. So most humans, it's said, and if you know, this is a book that I recommend. It's a tough old book to read, pretty thick, and you know, I'm not a greatest reader on the planet. You know, I had sort of I'm very dyslexic, but you know, I love writing and I love reading, but it's not the easiest thing for me to do. But there are a few books that have been very life-changing for me. One of them is written by Dr. David Hawkins, called Power versus Force. Now, what I noticed when I started to really understand this at a higher level, what I noticed was when I was in more of the darker place, I was actually trying to make things happen. I was trying to force things. Certainly one of the things I did, and you have to ask yourself, do I do this? I definitely tried to control my external environment. I tried to get it to be how I want it to be. Now that's sort of okay if you're decorating your room and you want it blue, then nothing to stop you painting it blue. But if a person is doing things that you don't like, in other words, they're out of kilter with the way that you feel that it should be, what I tended to notice I was doing is I was trying to control them and make them do their life my way. So, but you know, I've done, you know, hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of talks along with my beautiful wife, Nikki V. And often one of my favourite questions is to my audience, who here likes being controlled? How many people do you think put their hand up? Zilch. Absolutely no one puts their hand up. So, when we're in this sort of darker place, and look, darkness brings about fear. Fear of the darkness, yeah, comes from this place. So when we're fearful, what we tend to do is we tend to try to control our environment so that we feel safer. Okay, now, what emotions tend to hang out when we're in this darker place are things like at the very darkest end. So imagine the dimmer switch is like completely off, or we've got the dimmest of dimmest lights. Then the lowest sort of energies would be things like shame. So if you ask yourself, have I ever felt shame? Have I ever felt humiliated? Have I ever felt guilty? This is very dark energy. Yeah? Have I ever felt as though I've been blamed for anything? Or, you know, do I blame others? Okay, these are, your dimmer switch will be so dim because your perception of life is it's very dark, it's not very safe. So we try to get safe by controlling everything. Now, if there is an argument that says that the vast majority, if we put all of the consciousnesses of all the people, so remember there's not far short of 8 billion, I think we're about 7,800,000 right at this moment, humans on the planet. And each one of us has got this individual consciousness going on. And, you know, some are going higher, some are going lower, some are, you know, everybody's an individual. It's like, you know, we've got an individual fingerprint. You know, we're made up of the same kit. You know, we've all got a brain, 2 eyes, you know. I know there's the odd person that's, you know, got disabilities that's not got that, but the vast majority of humans are born in this, with this makeup. Inside of us, we've got heart, we've got lungs, we've got livers, kidneys, we've all got the same kit. But sometimes I sort of, you know, I use an example that if I took you to, you know, the computer shop, let's just say I took 20 people to a computer shop and I bought 20 identical computers, and then we all sat down around a big table and then we opened our computer and I said, right, okay, at this very moment these 20 computers are absolutely identical. So what I want you to do is I want you now to start using them. How long do you think it would take before those computers have turned from effectively clones into individuals? Well, almost immediately, because look, the keys, you've got so many choices of different keys to press. You know, within minutes we could get everybody to stop, and those computers have now become individualized around the person that has pressed the keys. So consciousness is very similar because our view of life is completely unique. Your life, whilst we've got the same kit as each other, every second of your life has been different to every other human's. So we've got 7.8 billion humans have all had an individual experience with their piece of kit. So what goes on, what's stored, what's stored in our computer is individual to them. And this means that individual humans have individual programming. Yeah. So the challenge, I guess, is that for the most part, that programming, as of yet, because as I said, the human's race is, let's say, in the nursery of its growth towards, living in a 150 watt light. So where most of us, if we added all the 7.8 billion people's consciousness up, which has a low point, a low point's when your energy or your emotionality is very low, and the high point's when it's it's very high. Like you could call it happy. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling joyous. I'm feeling calm. I'm feeling love. That would be a high. Low would be anger, hatred, blame. The blame game, as I sometimes call it. So we can oscillate between these. Yeah. And it's where do you hang out on average. So if we took each human and said, right, here's your high, this is the best you ever feel. Here's your low, this is the best you ever feel. How long do you hang out here and how long do you hang out here? And let's work out some sort of calculation in the middle, which will give you like an average. Now let's add all the humans together and go, what's the average of the human race? This is our high, this is our low, what's the average? Then in terms of the light, we'd be at best at about a 4 watt light bulb. So the light off completely, a lot of people would be living there out of the 7.8 billion, and then the average would be about the 4 watt light bulb. So that means that the room would be very dim. In other words, it's like you'd be like in a fog. You can't really see what's going on. And so when you can't see what's really going on, the thinking is survival. I need to keep safe here. I need to keep safe. And the emotionality will be one of them. I'm on guard because I can't see what's going on. Yeah, just imagine you're in a room with just a 4 watt light bulb. There's so much you can't see. So consciousness, becoming more conscious, would mean turning up your dimmer switch. So if you got it like, there are very few humans that would have their switch beyond like 40 watts. Now remember, our potential is 150 watts. That would be like totally enlightened. Yeah. But let's go, look, there's very few people that hang out between 40 watts and 150 watts. I mean, we're talking very few. I mean, we're not talking thousands. Out of the 7 billion, we're talking a few people that live their life there. That would be like if I called that a 10 out of 10. But look, the key thing right now is to ask yourself, so where do I live? This is why I love the 10-10 test. It's like a self-discovery. Nobody's telling you where you live. You go do the 10-10 life test, which you do at 10-10.life. Go there, press the button, do the test, and you'll get a score. You're going to get a score. Now, it's not the same range as the light bulb, but it gives you an idea about where's this sort of gap in your life. And when I discovered my gap was like, I lived at about like a 5.5, that sort of number. And I believe the average is between 5 and 6.5 at best. If we took all humans and put them there, it may well be that it's way less than that. I've never tested enough humans. Currently I've tested lots, and if you go and do the live test, you'll be helping us find what that average is, and also find out where people's challenges lie, so that we can give them the correct information which would enable them to turn up their dimmer switch and become more aware of themselves and their emotionality, their thinking, their behaviour, and how they could expand that. So when I look at the whole situation, and I obviously made this whole video, if you haven't seen it already, about fake news, you know, we are very unfortunately driven by the news that comes at us from the outside world. Now, if you connect to that news, or you're connecting through social media, and whatever you see, if you start to believe that's all there is, then effectively we're really missing out, because there's way more going on. That would be like, you know, we're very in the darkness if we believe what's, you know, coming at you through the news media or through social media. If we were to believe that's all that there is, we're in a very, very dark space. Because look, as you look at the beautiful planet Earth, it's not all darkness, even though, you know, we do collectively live in a pretty dark space compared to what we potentially could all live at. So when I see people, you know, rioting in the street or doing stuff like that, you have to ask yourself, or if that's you, you know, let's not make ourselves wrong, but let's ask ourselves a couple of questions. What's driving me here? What's driving me to do anything? You know, what am I thinking? What am I thinking? What emotions from my thinking are then driving me to run a behaviour? So look, if I said to you, look, let's watch this news, and we're seeing people, you know, marching and then getting up to, yeah, nothing wrong with marching if you're doing it from a place of a more enlightened space. But look, generally speaking, if we're doing something that's like anti, it's not really the way to expand your personal consciousness or the collective consciousness. The way to do that is to become more aware of yourself, so that you don't have those lower energy emotions going on in your body. So for example, if we see people en masse collected in a state, if you had to say to me, as I look at those people, if I asked you the question, what is the energy of those people right now? You know, if there was an emotion to describe the energy of what this collective people are doing, what words would you put to it? You know, the word I would use are probably a couple. One would be they're very frustrated with the system, not loving the system, or they're very angry with the system, and depending on how deep that goes, their behaviour will be based around that. Yeah, so it's unlikely that you're going to change something with anger. Well, you're not going to change it long term. You might change it short term, but it's unlikely that you're going to turn your light bulb up, because what we're doing is we're arguing or angry in the darkness. Yeah? Whereas actually, if we shined a light on what's really happening, then everything, we change our perception of that, because we've changed our emotionality around it. So imagine we could stand back and be the observers. Here we got a chance to stand back and observe the behaviour of the humans on planet Earth. Forget, you know, what colour we are or any of that. You know, we are one race of people. We might come in different shades. In fact, there's about 7, I believe, different shades of colour in the human race. But let's just say, look, we're all pretty much, the kit is the same. We're all the same computer. As you look at the human race en masse, look at the, you know, we're up in the space shuttle, well, it doesn't fly anymore, we're in the space station, yeah? And we look back at planet Earth and you go, so what words would you use to describe the energy of the human race? And my guess is you're going to not choose necessarily words that are right up the 150 light bulb end. You're much more likely to use words that are down the lower energy end, you know, such as frustrated, angry, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So look, if you can take anything from this, it will be the message of where's your light bulb, where's our light bulb turned to. And what would need to happen for me to turn it up? Well, I can share with you what needs to happen. We need to think different thoughts. We need to be in control of our emotions rather than our emotions in control of us. Because when we're out of control with our emotions, we're technically speaking out of control with our behaviours. And so those behaviours might be giving us the experience that we don't want to have. So if we want to get have the experience we want to have. We can create that, but we have to start with our thinking. In other words, our perception of how life is. And if we can turn that dimmer switch up a little bit, we can see more, so our perception changes automatically. So then we see things through different eyes, I often say, but we see things in a new light. Yeah, does that make sense? We see things as we turn our personal dimmer switch up. So look, the thing is that collectively we could all stand in a line and go, right, well, let's all turn our dimmer switch up. But that's very unlikely to happen. So we have to take responsibility. Responsibility is a word that's a very enlightened word. It's right up, we're looking, a very light word. But look, if we could take ownership, responsibility for the level of our dimmer switch, so that we see things in a more empowered, more loving, that's another word, a green word as I call it, it's up in the more light space, then everything in our experience would change. So then when we change, the people around us see us through different eyes. They see us in a different light. The people living around us see us in a different light. So imagine that we start to do that individually, take responsibility for where our dimmer switch is, learn more about our dimmer switch, how it works, how do we control our thinking, how do we become in control of our emotionality, how do we let go of some of these negative emotionalities that are in our body that get triggered by experiences that we have in our everyday life. In other words, something happens outside of us, a quick thought happens in a millisecond, and boom, we're in some sort of emotional behavioural state that then's not really serving us. So if we could do that individually, that would be the place to start. If we all individually took responsibility for turning our dimmer switch up so we were more enlightened, then obviously collectively we would have new experiences. And I believe those new experiences from a lighter space would bring the human race together as one. Whereas when we're in the dark, we tend to be angry, frustrated, we're blaming each other. You did this to me, so you need to stop doing that, it's not my fault. We're doing all that sort of stuff every day. Most humans are in a place where they don't want to be blamed, but they're being blamed, so they inadvertently blame back, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So look, I trust that's explained some of how you could change your perception around the current situation that the human race finds itself in, and how we could individually and collectively move more towards living at a 10 out of 10 life experience, which would be amazing to help planet Earth, because planet Earth itself is struggling under the strain of the 8 billion humans all living, very much down the dark end of the scale. The whole planet, every human will benefit from, us all turning our dimmer switch up. So I trust that's been helpful. If you got something great out of this, then feel free to press the subscribe button if you haven't already done that, so that you don't miss any more of these videos. We make 2 videos a week. My wife makes one and I make the other one. And obviously hit the notification bell so you get a little notification saying, yep, there's a new 1010 video just gone up onto YouTube. And of course, look, if you've got something really, really good from this, then feel free to press the share button and share it with your friends. Pop it on social media, get the message out that ultimately, if we all lived in a lighter room, everything we experience individually and collectively would definitely move us towards a more loving space with each other. And look, one of the things I learned, one of the most difficult things I've challenged myself with, is to have a little saying, a little affirmation, you could call it, to test myself. It's definitely something, if you really want to test yourself, then test yourself with this saying, which is, I love everything and everyone, even including myself. I love everything and everyone, including myself, all of the time. Now, that would be like a 150 watt light bulb if you can do that. So when we're living a little bit more in the dark, and trust me, I've lived in the pitch black, and then I found my dimmer switch and turned it up a bit. You know, I've still got a fair old way to go, but hey, look, it's a journey, and it's a beautiful journey to be on. So this is a lovely little thing to say to yourself. I love everything. It's a big challenge, yeah? And I love everyone, including myself, all of the time. If you could just move towards that, yeah, have that in your periphery, just as you know, you're thinking negative thoughts, but you can check in with yourself and go, hold on a minute, let me have this thought. I love everything and everyone, including myself, all of the time. Then we would all individually and collectively be moving much more towards living a 10 out of 10 collectively, but also the magnificent effect that would have on planet Earth would be incredible. So that's it. I'm going to leave it there for today, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.